very relevant today. I know I'm class of 93, so when I graduated, not only wasn't a side hustle, but I was told that I couldn't be an entrepreneur until I worked in corporate America for 10 years because an entrepreneur was your crazy uncle that lost all of his money twice. The tech changed all that, and now entrepreneurship is very well known. And I think something kind of similar happened with the side hustle. I think we can probably thank Uber a little bit for that, and that's just for socializing it. I built a couple national franchise brands, and with a couple hundred locations, and all of our franchise partners, they don't have employees. They essentially bring people on. It's part-time. It's a side hustle from a standpoint of both the sales and salespeople have installers. So we've used that actually in our franchises and in our companies to grow very quickly. And we've got three great panelists who are going to talk about their experiences. We've got Myron Bluford, Kelly Corrigan, and Brett Wigdorts. And if you guys could just take a couple minutes, introduce yourselves, and really what you're doing now, what started as your side hustle, and then one thing that really surprised you about that process. We'll start with Kelly.
Hi, I right now I am a writer of books and I have stuff in the New York Times. I just had a piece in there yesterday about the need for wonder during dark times, thanks to the Olympics. And then I have a podcast. And I don't know which one I would say is more the side hustle, the writing or the podcast. It's a very common job combination. I know many other people who have both these outlets. The thing I always wanted to be was a writer. So I just handed in my fifth book, and I have two children's books. And then somewhere along the line, the writing led to doing these in conversations with other writers on stage in front of live audiences. And that turned out to be hugely fun and a real joy to be in contact with other writers. It's a very solitary profession, and I'm a huge extrovert. So I loved it instantly. And it was a little bit before podcasts. And so I didn't quite know what to do with the enjoyment or how to replicate it or maybe get some revenue flowing because of it. And then podcasts became a thing, and my husband said you should have a podcast. And I am a horse that's hard to lead, so I was like, I don't know what a podcast is, and I don't really like you telling me what to do and whatever. It was so stupid. I should have done it instantly because there was a moment where there weren't that many podcasts. And by the time I started 5 years ago, there were 6 million, not that many active, 2 million active podcasts. But, everybody's sister-in-law has a podcast now. So, but I do it not for the compensation, but rather for the stimulation. Like, I think it probably will make me a better writer over time because I'm taking on board way more ideas and I'm reading at a clip because I'm preparing constantly for the next interview. And because I've been interviewed so many times about books and can tell almost instantly that the person interviewing me has not read the book, I never want to be that person. So I'm pouring a lot of ideas in my head all the time. And that I think is fun and to my greater benefit personally and professionally as a writer.
Great. Well, I think writing books is something you enjoy. I wrote one book and I hated it, and I'll never write one
I
again.
hated it. Oh, I hate writing. I only like having written.
Right, there you go.
I don't
Uh,
like, I mean, sometimes I like it, but not that often.
yeah, it's rough. Especially if you want to do it well. Like I think writing a B minus book is not that hard, but if you want to hit that
Well, now you
A
can
plus
just have
rank,
Claude write you your B minus
there,
book.
there you go. Exactly. Brett, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of your background?
You're on mute.
And we can switch over to Mylan
There you
while,
go.
there you go.
I was trying to unmute. Yeah, nice to see everyone, and really excited to be part of a University of Richmond group like this. Thanks for dialing in. So I graduated in 95, and I think I've done a few side hustles. I think the one I'm probably most known for is I was a management consultant. I was working for McKinsey for a few years, and they sent me to London to do a piece of work on different banks and things, and I was finding it a bit not fulfilling. And I got on a project looking at how businesses could help education in London, because at that point, Tony Blair was prime minister, and one of his priorities was education, and people were really struggling that the London school system was failing in a big way. And I come from a family of teachers. And as part of that, I wrote for our clients, these business groups, I wrote a business plan for an idea of getting top graduates to teach in low-income schools and building a leadership movement around it, because there's also a real shortage of head teachers and school leaders in there. And at the end of it, I just done a bunch of projects where, like, we had come up with these recommendations. And one of the problems of being a consultant is you come up with these brilliant genius recommendations, and then no one listens to you afterwards. And I was finding that very frustrating. And I remember talking to my boss, who was Ian Davis, who ended up becoming the global head of McKinsey years later. And he said, "Look, Brett, this is a great idea. Why don't you just take a leave of absence to do it? Take a few months, see if you can get it started, and you could use the office and things like that." So I was like, "Okay, great." So I guess I did that for a few months. I thought I'd come back, and then after 3 months, I was in a meeting trying to get some politicians and people to support it, and someone asked me like, "What's your role here?" And I was saying, "Oh, I'm a management consultant on leave of absence." And one of the guys who was helping me like said to me, "No, no, don't describe yourself that way. Just describe yourself as like CEO of this thing." And I remember saying, "But no one's appointed me. Like, how can I do that?" He said, just describe yourself that way, and people will treat you differently." So even though it didn't exist, I didn't have a board or anything. I just started describing myself that way. Then after a few months, we got the support of Tony Blair. We got support of business leaders, and it was going. And I was just there as chief executive, and I was 27 at the time, and they sort of, no one even appointed me at the time. It was just kind of given that I was going to do it. And Ian at the time just said, "Look, don't you think this is better than McKinsey?" And I agreed, and I ended up leading it for 15 years. And about 10 years later, we finally hired a head of HR who was going through all the employment contracts and realized I never had one, even though we were a big organization at that point. So I guess that was like an example of a side hustle that turned into a big career move that was great. And I had an amazing 15-year run there, like growing Teach First. And then when I knew I wanted to leave Teach First, I started to think what I wanted to do next. And I spent really my last year there just kind of really thinking and talking to lots of people. I always recommend this book, What Color is Your Parachute, which I always give to as a graduation present to anyone who I know or anyone who's looking for what to do. And I remember using that again at that point and different things. And I got really interested in early years and thinking, there must be a way to help people start small nurseries in their homes where they can make good living and can help children. And I got very excited about how early years education is really important for children's development. There must be a better way to structure it that works better for parents and for practitioners using tech. And so I just spent like quite a lot of time talking to me about that. And I, started dabbling a bit in that. And then, as I was leaving Teach First, I started Tiny, which is my current company, which is a for-profit. Teach First is a charity, which is a tech-based VC-backed company looking at how basically a whole platform helping people start and run small nursery schools in their homes as childminders in England. So those would be my two, I guess, side hustles that turned into a real thing. And then, I guess along the way, a number of other things. But I think it's, really exciting just to follow your curiosity. I think both those things were areas I was really curious about. And I just started getting really excited about it, both options. And I just, like for any entrepreneur, once you get excited about something, it's really hard to be an entrepreneur, and there's many more bad times than good times usually. And you have to just really be excited about what you're doing and just love it. And I think for both times I felt that way.
Yeah, and first of all, I think the cool thing about starting any business, side hustle or not, is you get to pick your title. It could be anything you want. And I think the idea of as you're going through this, I think a lot of people, whether you're trying to research what can a good side hustle be, it sounds like from both you guys and what I hear from a lot of people when they start things, you kind of find it finds you, or you find it, you're not necessarily looking for it, and that's where the passion comes from. You're not going to go into ChatGPT and say, "What are the top 10 best side hustles?" That can certainly work, but you guys are telling these stories. It's really about the passion, things that you fall into and see it's something that could grow. Mylan, could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, I mean that's honestly like a perfect a perfect segue. So hey everybody, Mylan Bluford, class of 2015. So my side hustle, which I even hate calling it like a side hustle because I have a 9 to 5, but then this is like my 6 to midnight almost. So it's never ending. So my co-founder, Terrence, who also is a Richmond grad, same year, we started a digital tattoo marketplace platform called TatMe. So, it's not as exciting as like a podcast or living in London and opening schools, but, people like tattoos. And, we started this business because, Terrence and I being two Black guys, just wanting to create a better experience for how does a person, I mean, really anybody, but specifically for people of color, like how do you find the best tattoo artist that's qualified to tattoo your skin? Because, I mean, whether you're white, black, indifferent, doesn't matter. Everybody's skin is different. The way that you tattoo it, the way that you shade, the colors, the openness you leave in the space, it's different for every person. And the experiences that we had, getting tattooed as very broke college students going to Lucky 13 on Broad Street. Um, Not everybody knows how to tattoo melanated people. And some tattoo artists won't even tell you that. They'll just tattoo you, take your money, and then 5 years later, you look at this tattoo and you're like, it actually sucks. And I wish I hadn't got it. But now, especially today, because social media and all these super talented people that are coming into coming into this space of the tattoo space, like there are so many qualified artists that can tattoo anybody, everybody, but it's how do you find those people? How do you sift through all the noise on Instagram? So what we're building, or what we've built and what we're continuing to build is just a platform that brings all of these tattoo artists from all over the country, and just creating a platform where anybody, everybody can go there, search for who they're looking for, see their work, book their tattoos and have a great experience. So we launched the platform in 2023 officially. So a few years into the game, it's a labor of love. Learned a lot about the tattoo industry. To Alan's point, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't dream about being an entrepreneur. I didn't go to Richmond and be a computer science major to become an entrepreneur. Terrence and I are just both passionate about tattoos, and we realized that this is a problem that we could solve if we tried. So we did, and here I am.
Awesome. So, let's talk about balancing it with real life because the side hustle, you've got that. And like you said, you've got your 9 to 5 and then you've got your 6 to midnight. Um, if you guys could all just kind of share, how did you manage building your side hustle while still handling your main job responsibilities, your families, and other priorities?
So, it's funny that writing books was my first side hustle in terms of having to find time for it and having to believe that it's worth finding time for it and that somehow this will all amount to something. There's like a lot of faith in all of these projects. And because it starts as this side thing, I just think it's worth saying that it's been my experience that not everyone is an early stage investor. And by investor, I mean literally people who put money in, but I also mean people who will get psyched about your idea with you and think that it's reasonable for you to be carving off hours of your day to invest yourself. And so I just would say be very careful who you talk to about your little seedling of an idea in the beginning because people can cast a pretty big shadow over and nothing grows in shade. So I was very quietly working on this book, and I had cancer in my 30s, and at the same time that my father had cancer. So I was writing this book because I thought my father was going to die, and I had just learned about self-publishing, and I was like, well, at a minimum, I can print up a copy of this and hand it to him before he dies, and he'll know finally like how great it has been to be his daughter. And so that was my mission. It was really clean and it was really achievable. Like no one could stop me from doing that. And then because I could see this final product and this moment of delivery, that was very motivating for me to keep going. And also, I felt like I was working against the clock of mortality. And so, and I had cancer and I was in chemotherapy. So I had tons of time because people weren't making me go to the grocery store anymore and I wasn't doing laundry. And so all of my responsibilities as the primary caretaker of a family were lifted off me. So that's like one set of choices with just that special note about preserving your little magic idea, keeping it to yourself long enough for it to become something that a mid-stage investor could believe in. For me, that's like my husband. Like if I had told my husband what I was doing, I don't think he would have given me the face of love that I was looking for. I think he would have been like, Kelly, you're so sick. Like, just be sick. Like, you don't need to start another project. And so it was like I had to keep it a secret until I could hand him something. And then he was like, oh, God, this is pretty decent.
I think it's a great point. I would say most people, and tell me if you guys agree, that you tell your idea to, whether it's to start a side hustle or a new business, most people are going to say it's not a good idea for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of it's because they don't have the courage to go out and do it, but also because they don't see it. Two of my franchises, we did custom pull-out shelving for cabinets. It's not really an industry. It was a small business actually in Richmond that I took over and franchised, but so many people told me that's not a real business. That's something people do on the side, and we've got franchisees who do $4 or $5 million a year with this industry. But until it was a thing, it wasn't a thing. So make sure that people, don't let people put you down. And then I think also as you start making this money, valuing yourself and outsourcing. I'm a huge fan of if you don't value your hours and your time, whether it's $100 an hour or $1,000 an hour, you're not going to be able to get there at least very easily. So value your time and take that extra money you're making and use it to outsource, from a work-life balance. If I can pay somebody to do something, I typically do that, not because I can't or I don't want to do it, but you've got limited time. That's your scarcest resource. Brett, how do you handle this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, amazing story, and I agree with what you said. I mean, I actually read a book about Teach First and how it got started and everything, and I read about five cants basically, where people told me five reasons it would never succeed, and I think all of them were really good logical reasons, which if I had any intelligence, I would have listened to. So there is something insane about doing some of these things, and I think obviously you have these sort of talks. You usually hear people who have been somehow successful in one way or another. But 90% probably fail at different points, and then it's about picking yourself up and trying it again and again and again. And both Teach First and Tiny and other things I've done, I often talk about the valley of whenever I meet our new teachers or childminders now, I often talk about the valley of death, which there was a moment when we were starting Teach First where I needed basically the government to change some rules. I needed £1 million from the government, £1 million from business. And I thought I had it all set up. And I had this big meeting with the minister at the time who basically said, no, it's never going to happen. And I had all my supporters around me. And as I left, they all kind of said, okay, well, it was a good try. We'll go on and do something else. And there was just one mentor I had at the time who said to me, we had a coffee and he said, all right, Brett, is this a valley or a cliff? And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, look, if it's a cliff, you're dead, right? You fall off a cliff. If it's a valley, then all we have to do is figure out a way through the valley. And how do you climb out of this valley? And so then he gave me like a day at a time and we really mapped out, okay, I have to get this stakeholder to speak to this stakeholder and, kind of different plan Bs, plan Cs, plan D, plan E, plan F, on and on and on. And we managed to climb out of it. And I often tell our teachers too, like when you're starting a new career, including teaching in a low-income school, you're going to get some valleys of death. It's really hard. Like new teachers are usually not very good, no matter how smart you are and how well trained you are. And you just have to know you climb out of that valley, and you're constantly thinking how to climb out of it to get to this hill of happiness, I would call it, when you're, having a real great impact in a child's life. And I think every entrepreneur I've ever met has those valleys. I'm sure I'm seeing the other two nodding, the other three nodding. And I've seen it at Tiny. I've seen other places where I can go on and on about times where we were this close to death. At Tiny, we almost ran out of money 2 years ago, and it looked really bad for all sorts of reasons. And I do think the biggest difference between most successful entrepreneurs and ones who don't succeed are the ones who just have this really weird, illogical belief in what they're doing and just never give up, because there's so many times it's so much easier to give up. I mean, that's usually my lesson in the last 25 years, at least.
Yeah, the highs are very high and they're very rare, and the lows are extremely low and they tend to last quite some time. And my favorite definition of an entrepreneur is jumping off a cliff and building the plane on the way down, which the side hustle can mitigate that risk quite a bit because, and I think you also have to get used to failing and being okay with failing and learning how to celebrate that failure. And as I see our franchise partners as they start, their biggest fear, they invest a lot of money, is not the money, is as you really talk to them, it's public failure. You know, if you don't get into law school, no one needs to know about that. So many of our failures, you don't have to tell anybody. You're not going to put on Facebook. No one knows about. But if you start a business and side hustle or not, and it fails, everybody knows about it. And what do you tell them? And that's where I coach a lot of people who are starting franchises or businesses. And, what are you going to tell people if it doesn't? And what that does is starts to build up blame. Like you're starting to find reasons why you're going to fail, or if you fail, what that's going to be. And just getting those stories out of your head. And like you said, Brett, just make it happen and keep getting up, fall down and keep getting up and failing forward and failing fast.
It's always the person who gets up the 100th time, that succeeds, after 99 failures, I think. Yeah, and sorry, the one other thing I did want to say, which I totally agree, that I've learned, the way you don't burn out, in addition to having a wonderful partner and support network around you, is just relying on other people. Like the big mistake I made early on was not relying, micromanaging, having to like go into so much detail and not, hiring the right people around me, not trusting them enough. I think so many new entrepreneurs and people who are starting things make that mistake. And I think, the best way is really get good people that you can trust around you.
And you will, in most cases, my experience has always been as you start scaling your side hustle, if you see it works, that's the goal, is to scale it and always be thinking about how do I scale it. But rarely have I started something where the people I hired initially are the people that are around a year or two from then. Because as it starts scaling, the people that you used to kind of start off, some of them just can't keep up, and that learning curve. So that's also important to know, is finding the right people as you start scaling is, I think, one of the toughest things about starting a business, side hustle or not. Mylan, how do you balance all this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love everything that everybody was saying. I mean, it's for me, it's tough. So again, like the 9 to 5. So I work as a software engineering consultant. So like literally like a true 9 to 5 where I'm, serving clients all the time. Literally just had to like mute my teams in Slack before I joined this. So I'm not constantly like looking to see if people are checking for me or things are happening or whatever. So, for the way that I try to find balance, and I was this way in college, at Richmond as well. I've always just been a person that just does a lot. I've always maintained a lot of different projects. Or, when I was at Richmond, like I said, I was a computer science major. Played on the football team. I worked like 3 different jobs on campus. I was president of student organizations. I was doing a lot at all times. And so transitioning into, having this, working full time and a side hustle, just kind of leaning into a lot of the same things where it's like I just try to create as much structure for myself as I can. Where like when I'm in my 9 to 5, I try to keep my side hustle things to a minimum. I not looking at my emails a ton unless it's urgent things, not trying to respond to a ton of things. And then once the 9 to 5 ends, it's the same thing. Like give myself a little bit of time, let my brain reset before I start diving into the side hustle business. And then outside of that, I enforce myself like a weekend. Because otherwise, if I don't, I'm going to work all the time. My brain never sleeps. So from like 6 p.m. on Friday till Sunday, like that is my weekend. Sundays I work because if it's football season, I'm like, watching football anyway. It's nothing for me to just like be on my computer. So during football season, Sunday's a work day unless we're visiting family. But it's just tough. Like naturally, you're passionate about you you're passionate about your side hustle. So that's the thing that, for me at least, is all consuming. I'm always thinking about, oh man, it would be really cool if we could do this for TapMe, or like I need to reach out to these people, or I want to build this feature, I want to do that. How can we change our revenue model? How can we do this? And so it is hard to kind of compartmentalize the different things in your mind at all times, especially when you have like my job is my primary source of income. I need that job to pay for TapMe because we're still pre-raise. Me and Terrence kind of pay for the entire business out of our pocket outside of the money that the platform generates. So I need the 9 to 5 to pay for the side hustle. So I have to at least give enough there to keep that engine running. But it's like I'll be real, like it's tough to find balance, and it also is dependent on you. Like I think everybody's kind of said, like you will go as far as you're willing to push yourself. And if your side hustle is something that like, this is my side hustle for now, but eventually this is going to become my main source of income. This is going to be the thing that I want to do all the time. Then like that is going to change. You're going to have to make sacrifices. You might not, you know, do some other things on the side. I used to coach football in DC. I had to stop coaching because I knew that tap me is going to be the thing that I need to pour more energy into. And so I've had to make sacrifices with my career. I don't pursue other tech jobs because I'm comfortable in this job because I know I can work 8 hours and then transition to tap me. If I took a job at Google, I probably can't do that. And so there's always trade-offs and sacrifices that you're going to have to make, again, depending on how much of energy do you want to spend on your side hustle. If you want to keep it a side hustle and it's something you're passionate about and you're not interested in monetizing it fully and you just want to do that because it's fun and it fills your cup, that's great. But if it's something that like you want to become a main thing, then it just might look different. You might have to make some sacrifices along the way. And you just have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with just making those sacrifices, knowing that like long-term success is around the corner. So,
I was thinking about something when you were talking, which is the difference in how something feels when you're in the hunt versus when it's landed and it becomes like your main, when it transitions from your side hustle to your main gig.
mhm.
And for me as a writer, writing the first book was a thrill. And then when the first book came out, it did super well. And so in the middle of that book tour, I got a call from my agent that was like, Random House would like to give you a 2-book deal. And I was like, I don't even know if I could write 2 more books. And they're like, well, it doesn't matter. We're taking it. Like it's a big number and we're going to take it. And I was like, oh my God. And those books didn't feel the same. So the note I guess I would share is that you really should capitalize on the incredible early energy because it won't last forever. You will get used to your project and you will get used to being able to do it and it will change the way you feel about it. Like that is the fact of our psychology. So like if you've got a head of steam on it, sacrifice everything until the head of steam runs out because that is such a powerful engine to make progress and you should just assume that it will get smaller over time.
I
Great.
totally plus one that. Like, I'm just thinking at Teach First, like the first 8, 10 years, I just loved it. And it was like so much energy and excitement. And then we were the largest graduate recruiter in the country. We were like a really big presence. And then, I had a massive team. And after the last few years, I was kind of phoning it in. I realized like I was finding it quite boring, at some point. Like, I mean, it was sort of, you know, gave the same talk for the 20th time or do this for the 30th time. And I remember saying to my wife, like, I need to leave. Like, I was thinking at the time, like, I could, this could be my thing for the next 30 years and I'd sort of die a slow death as much as I loved it. And I think it was one of the best. I mean, now, 7 years later, I can say, like, probably the best decision I made was leaving at that moment because, I have that excitement again in my life and I'm really enjoying it. And I remember my wife saying, do you remember how stressed you were? Do you remember how difficult it was? And obviously I didn't because I think I sort of have maybe entrepreneurs do this. I remember the good times and I forget the bad times. She remembered, but I was,
It's
ready to do it
literally like
again.
having babies.
Yeah. Well, I've never had that.
But I can tell you, men, that's what it's like. You're like,
Mhm.
it's holy hell, 17 hours of labor, people in and out of your body all day long. And then they hand you the baby, and then you're like, I can't wait to do it again.
I love that. Last bit of practical. Oh, I'm sorry, Alan. I'm going to cut you off.
No,
Last bit
good.
of like practical advice that I'll give as relates to like the balance. Like find what helps you stay organized, and like so things don't. Because again, like if you're doing a lot of things, it's easy for like the life stuff to fall off your plate for you to like miss going to events or miss like birthdays and things like that or whatever. If for your side hustle for your job for me, like my calendar is kind of like everything. I have to have everything on my calendar. I track my job, my side hustle. Me and my wife have a shared calendar where we're adding like events and stuff. So we know where each other's going to be. We need to be somewhere for something. I write a lot of things down. I'm kind of old school in that way. Like I have to write it down for me to remember it. So I have like a lot of sheets of paper and notebooks on my desk all the time, like trying to keep track of stuff. So that'd be like if I could offer one bit like really practical advice, things you can do to kind of help balance, just find whatever it is for you that helps maintain some sense of like organization or structure so you're not losing track of things. So
And yeah, that passion definitely wears off over time. I think it's like any relationship you have. Like in the beginning, you meet a girl or a boy, and it's very exciting, and then you get married, and it becomes serious. And I think that that transition, and Mylan, you're kind of looking at this in the future. Like once you commit, and it's no longer a part-time thing, and you're no longer dating your side hustle, and now all of a sudden you're married to your side hustle, and that's the thing. And when you decide to do that, it's a scary thing to do because not just from the income thing, but now there's a lot more pressure because you don't have that side. You don't have your full income coming in. And so when do you decide to burn the boats? Because at some point you need to burn the boats.
oh yeah, 1,000. But I think about that day every day. Like I pray for that day of when I can just focus specifically on TATME. And I mean, hopefully that day is coming soon. A lot of it is around like our fundraise. We hit our raise target. We have enough money in the door where I can have, definitely a reduced salary than what I have now, but some type of income, and we can fully operate as like a full, startup that has revenue, that has money in the bank. That would be great. And like especially to Kelly's point, like just trying to keep that same level of energy. What scares me sometimes is like there is a certain thing to having like too much free time. Like I operate the best when like I am under stress of like I have no room on my calendar where I know I have to be here. I got to do this. I got to do this. I have so little like limited amount of time that I know I can't be on Instagram just doom scrolling. And so it's not fear, but around like, okay, once TATME becomes the full time and I only have a 9 to 5, how can I maintain the same velocity that I do now when I know I might only have 3 or 4 hours a night versus now I have 8 hours in a day? Am I going to 2x that, 3x that, or am I going to still have the same velocity, but now I'm just going to waste more time during the day?
I
So,
think
it's definitely, oh, so go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about this, but
Mhm.
I sort of feel like we might be a type. And
Mhm.
as for as much as we're talking about our passion for the specific content or business that we pursued, my gut is, I think I'm the oldest person here, is you will do it again. Tap Me will move into the lead spot, and at some point you will have another side hustle
Hope not.
because there's a type
Mhm.
that doesn't want to say no to things, that wants to try the next thing.
Mhm.
So, for me, it was like I had this book career and it was great. And then I started this podcast career, and then I started a TV show on PBS. And then now I'm writing a screenplay. Why? I often think to myself, why don't you just stay in the writer box? Like there are people, I often interview them. I just interviewed the great George Saunders last week, who just write books. He's written 13, I've written 5. But I'm not
Mhm.
that type. So a thing that I feel like I've come to later in life that I will share is that I feel like I have stopped arguing with myself about the way that I work.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's really
Oh,
great. Now I
super.
feel like I
Yep.
understand myself more. I really found that useful.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, and
definitely a
sometimes
type,
you
I
have
will
to pull
say.
back on that. How do you become disciplined? Because, like for example, during COVID, I got bored and bought 4 businesses and regretted all 4 of them, and then took 2 or 3 years to sell them and get out of them. But yeah, I think we get bored sometimes. But how do you maintain that balance between focus so you can be successful and then starting these other things? We've got a couple questions before we get to that. Would love for you guys to just share one piece of advice that you would give to people listening in. Who have an idea but haven't started it yet. I think we lost Kelly.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like what Milan's doing is the right way to do it. You start small and you just keep on trying different things, right? And testing. Like I feel like in some ways that was the advantage of Teach First. Tiny, because I'd done well at Teach First, I found it really easy to raise money and I got great co-founders and stuff. And we kind of started relatively big, which is in some ways a great place to be. But a few years later, I'm thinking, I kind of think we probably would have been better off starting a bit smaller the first year or two, testing a bit more before we raised the money, because, a lot of that money I think we wasted. I think we learned a lot, in a much more expensive way than we needed to. And I think with all these, I think becoming an expert in just testing and learning, every step of the way. It sounds like
Yeah,
that's what
and
you're doing,
And
Molly.
that's really good to do, I think, in the beginning, because you will, as you scale, it becomes harder and harder to have those small experiments. My
Hmm.
last franchise, I spent a couple years just experimenting because I knew that as it started scaling, it becomes really difficult. I could come in the office one day, have an idea in the morning, and we're testing the afternoon. The next day, we figure out, is it working? Is it not? Do we need to stop? Do we need to pivot? And doing as much of those experiments as you can before you scale. Mylan?
Yeah, welcome back, Kelly. I see you joined. I'm assuming your laptop died.
I don't know. No, it's fine. I don't know what happened.
Um, okay, yeah, so sorry, my mind went totally blank. So when you're starting, I know it's like, especially when you have this massive vision of like what this product or this thing could be, and you always think about like the end goal of like, okay, it's going to be this massive thing, this huge idea. But like to Brett's point, like you just have to start somewhere. And like you're going to eat an elephant, what do? You break it up into the smallest pieces possible and you start chewing, right? And it's the same thing, like especially in today's landscape of AI and automation and the fact that like a single person or two people can build an entire platform overnight, seemingly. It's easier now more than ever to start something. And so for me, when I first started building TapMe, although I've been a software engineer, I'd never built a mobile application before. I never built a mobile app. I write like, server code most of the time. But I had to start. And so I just started watching YouTube. I started doing research. I took some self-training courses on like how to start building. I built some sample applications. I did all of this for months before I even wrote one line of code for TapMe, just to kind of prime myself and learn and teach what are the things and the skills that I need to have before I actually start building this thing. And even today, when like I'm like there's these massive features and things that we're trying to build, it's like, okay, I have 4 hours of work in time that I can spend tonight working. What's like the one thing that I can do? If I'm going to build one screen for this app, like let me just do that and know that if I do that every night for 2 weeks, I'm going to eventually have a full feature built and I can launch that and we can test and figure it out. So just start. What's the smallest thing? Like literally smallest thing you can do. Do that every day, and it over time it compounds. It may seem like I didn't do a lot, but you look up in a week and it's like, oh, I've actually made a lot of progress. So just start as small as possible and just keep going.
And I just,
Kelly?
if I could tag on to this, there's great behavioral psychology that talks about progress begetting progress.
Hmm.
So even at the kind of meta level, touching your project every single day has huge impact in your mind space. So like Jerry Seinfeld said that he used to write comedy every day, and every day that he wrote a joke, he would put a big X on his calendar. And as he started to see those X's line up, then it became this thing where he would never not do it because it would just kill him to not be able to X off a day. But the neuroscientists among us would say that hitting a mark every day, not only is it activating your subconscious and helping you actually solve problems and tricking you into working when you don't feel like working because you think you're just going to do one thing and then it turns out you lift your head and 3 hours have passed. But also, even if you did just do the one 15-minute project each day and never broke your streak, it would do something to your neurons that would be really advantageous to your project.
Yep.
100%.
So I want to pivot to, we got some good questions out there, see if you guys can answer them. One of the questions is, when you, in your side hustle, you find that there's areas that you don't know about and you require outside expertise. Do you bootstrap it yourself or do you outsource, legal? There's all those things. Like we don't know all these things. You never will. So how do you guys handle that?
It depends. It depends on what it is. But also, again, I think with the access to information that we have now, like still, I put a lot of things in like just chat, like chat or something like or Claude, and I'm like I ask a lot of questions. Like recently, like we were going through this whole thing around like Delaware C Corp registrations and franchise taxes, and I'm trying to like understand all of the legal jargon around that. And I'm having like lengths and lengths of conversations with chat to the point where like I fully understand how Delaware franchise taxes are calculated, and I can have those conversations with our CPA to understand that. So like, yeah, but would I actually file that? No, I'm going to find a qualified CPA and do that. But like, there's just you can get so much farther ahead now with just a little bit of time and elbow grease, like just talking to, you know, Google or some AI model, just doing some hard research to learn as much as you need to know. And then from there, you're better equipped to make that decision on, okay, is this something that I can handle? Or is this something that I need to outsource and do? And and then from there, I would say, like, as any entrepreneur, like as much as I hate LinkedIn now because everybody's a LinkedIn influencer, it is still an invaluable tool, like in terms of having a professional network. Where if like there are questions that I have or somebody I need to reach out to, it's nothing to make a post on LinkedIn and just kind of have people in your network reach out to you. So
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned AI because, AI is not just, a lot of people are still, I think, using it to write better emails or LinkedIn
mhm.
posts, but it's an incredible thought partner. And everybody in our
Yes.
company is trained to use it. In fact, they have on their monitor, can AI help me with this? So everything they need help with, they look at that. And, just a quick tip, if you prompt it well, it's going to be a great thought partner. If you don't ask it the right way or give enough information. But we use a thing called CRIT. So it's an acronym for you give it the context, and then you tell it its role. You are the
Mhm.
best legal expert in this area or whatever it is. This is the critical one. Interview me one question at a time until you have enough information to answer or to
Mhm.
complete the task. And then you give it the task. And those interview questions get smarter and smarter and smarter. And then what it comes out with, and you can continue to interact with it. And I would say almost for everything that you need to outsource or look at, it can help you with, and then it can point you in the right direction. Then I go to Perplexity and say, where can I find these resources? Or if it's a legal document, like you said, like I'm probably not going to use that legal document unless it's really basic, but I am going to take that legal document it comes up with and give it to my attorney and say, edit this instead of start from scratch and send me a bill for $10,000. So there's a lot. I think using AI is a huge tool for anybody starting a business right now if you leverage it correctly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible the last few years. I mean, just seeing how it's changed entrepreneurship. I mean, on the one hand, I really worry about graduates' jobs, because I just think the amount of legal fees we pay, the amount of we don't really need a head of HR anymore in different ways. Like, just so many other costs have gone down, and the way we can use it, it's just incredible. I mean, the other part of the question, it's interesting. Like, I started one thing where I was like the sole founder, and Tiny, I have two co-founders, and I have to say, having co-founders, at least for me, has been much nicer and much more fun. And when you're talking about like support network around you, I mean, I think with both of them, I had support networks, I had mentors that were really important to me that I would talk about, and loving girlfriend now wife and all sorts of things. But there's something about having co-founders who are as invested in what you're doing as you are that I have to say has just reduced my stress level like so much, 80%. Because I think if you find the right people, the three of us get along very well. We have very complementary skills, very different skills, but each of us have the same vision for what we're building, similar values, which I think is really important. And that's just made it a lot more fun this time around, I'd say.
1,000%.
Yeah, and I think, I've had partners before, and it's definitely, or investors. It's great to have people with you on your team, whether they're working with you as a partner or investing, just to be there, to celebrate the successes, the highs and the lows. There's actually not a lot of people you can go to high five when you have a success. And the same thing goes for those deep failures, who to go to talk to. But also, when you have co-founders or partners that you're bringing in, I think it's really critical to lay out who's responsible for what early on, because in the beginning it's all kumbaya, we're all doing this stuff, and then a year, 2, 3 years later, you're doing all the work. Someone else is kind of on the side, not really all that involved, but from an equity standpoint. So if you can build that into your plan and make sure, maybe the equity shifts later on based on some things. So putting those things in place, and then also I think just what is your end goal? That's one of the things that I'd love to get your thoughts about as a panel, beginning with the end in mind. As you think about your side hustle and it starts to take life, what does that look like? And it can change, but what's your vision? Where do you want to land? Because if you don't know where you're going, you're probably not going to get there.
Yeah, I remember when we started Teach First, and I was arguing with the government because they want us to start with 50 teachers. I said, no, no, we need to start with at least 250. That would be the minimum. I won't do it for less than 250. And there's this massive argument. And, people are saying, well, no one's ever recruited, more than 50 or 50 from these top universities like Oxford and Cambridge that we were going for. And my thought was like we needed to start big and needed to, have a minimum number. And I remember like when we launched, I said something like, well, this will be the largest graduate recruiter in the country. And it took us about 10 years to get there. And literally people thought I was insane. I think even people were supportive thought it was insane. And, probably people also thought it was like just huge ego or I don't know what it was at the time. But there was something like about just having that vision, like that was really clear of where we wanted to go. That when we got there, like I wasn't surprised. I think everyone was surprised except for me. And when you get those valleys of death, like it helps you go through it because you're like, no, no, this is where we're going. I'm absolutely sure. So, I'm sure there's a pathology around there and some psychological issue that, many of us have as entrepreneurs, because you just have to believe that something's going to become a reality when, it doesn't really make much sense to believe that.
Yeah, and I think if you aren't telling people aren't telling you you're insane, you probably don't have a great idea as you're going through it. So I think we have a follow-up question here for you, Brett, and I think everybody can kind of jump in is unpacking a little bit more on the role of mentors, and I think all three of you guys can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in mentors, and Ian Davis, who's former global head of McKinsey, is still a mentor of mine. 25 years later, I just met with him last week. Go for advice. There's a few other incredible mentors I've had, and you just want people who believe in you, I guess, who can, and also who can be really honest with you. Like I think, any mentor I've had is someone who tells me when I'm full of shit, tells me like, look, you're losing your staff. I remember having a difficult conversation with mentors, like your team doesn't trust you because you're not doing this right and you're not managing them well, or Brett, you need a CFO, you don't know your numbers well enough, things like that. You need people who can be honest with you, I think, along the way. And I think I've been really fortunate to have some great mentors along the way.
It's awesome. Mylan?
Yeah, I retweet 1,000%. Like mentorship, and for me, really just like community. Definitely. So not to be too long-winded. So like last year, one of my big goals was to just build like a really strong entrepreneur like startup community in the DC area. Because especially as we're getting into the fundraising scene and understanding a lot of that is just networking in of itself. So last year, my big goal was just to just go outside, like go to, startup happy hours, go to networking events, like meet people, talk, share stories. Because you find, again, like what Kelly was saying earlier, like it takes a certain type of person to put yourself out there and build these kinds of things, to follow your dreams, to build something from nothing. And there really is like a shared experience, whether you are an author, or you have franchises, or you're a tech startup. Like there's a lot of shared experience in creating something from nothing, and just having that community of people where, again, like these are people that understand like how hard this shit is all of the time. And they're not going to be the ones that are going to tell you like you shouldn't do that. They're going to be the ones that are going to say, "Hey, I had that same problem. Here's how I solved it," or like, "Here's how you can do it differently so you don't run into this issue." And so for me, like whether it's a specific mentor or a group of mentors, I just like surrounding myself with people that are in the same place, kind of mentally, of like where I'm trying to be or where I am right now. So mentors, absolutely, but even more so that for that, it's just like having a shared community.
Great. Kelly?
I was still thinking about goals and like how to set goals if you're a person who's making something like the stuff I make. And of course, everyone talks about this, but there are external goals and there's internal goals. So, you can't really say that your goal is to be on the bestseller list. Like you just don't have enough control over that. But every single person who writes a book wants that, of course. And it's freeing to be able to say that out loud. I remember talking to BJ Novak from The Office, and he had a book coming out, and he's a creator's creator. And I was like, "What do you want out of this book?" He's like, "I want it to be number one on the bestseller list. Like I didn't write it to read it. I wrote it to share it." And it was like, thanks. The other thing that I got to, and if there are women on this call who have similar experiences, I got to like, oh, I want to make a certain amount of money in a year. And in order to get there, I had to have frank conversations with people in my community. Because boy, you just do not know like what money podcasts make, what their margin is. Like some podcasts have 9 employees, so they're underwater all the time. Some people have so many partners, agents, and managers that it all goes out the door before it's over. And so I had goals about money, which was fun and freeing for me and satisfying, I must say. And then I also had goals of like, what would this feel like? Like I had this sense during the pandemic that my daughters were watching me and my husband on these Zooms, and everyone's kind of in their little boxes, hunched over and like this. And I thought, I don't think that we're making adulthood look that great right now. Like maybe they're depressed because it's like, wait a second, am I taking like 7 APs so that I can go to such and such a college so that I can have your job where all you do is like go from Zoom to Zoom in these little boxes and everybody looks so miserable? So I remember thinking like, this was your dream. That was totally my dream from 7 years old to write books. And shame on me for forgetting that or enjoying complaining about it or leaping into the conversation to say how hard it is. This is what I always wanted. And I'm so lucky that it worked out. And so I wanted like a third kind of goal for me was wanting to remember that this is what I wanted and to look like it, like to make sure to tell my face that this is what I always wanted, you know?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think that in our time's kind of coming to a close, we got a great question from Karen, who says, to your point, Kelly, you're talking about reaching the goals. Which is more rewarding for you, the process of getting to the goal or actually reaching that specific goal or milestone?
When I can enjoy the process of writing, it is sublime because it's very private and it's sort of empowering in a way that is profound to be able to be so elated by a sentence that I made up. Like I did this in this New York Times thing that I published yesterday, I said something like that Chloe Kim, looking at her in the half pipe, she looks like a happy marble. Happy marble made me really happy in a very private way. And then my friend Carrie was like, "Oh my God, I love happy marble." And I was like, "Thank you." That was like the one little flourish that I just got such a kick out of. So I think that if I can get there without the external, prior to the external, um, or even in the absence of the external, because it doesn't always come, that is pretty sublime.
Yeah. Yeah. Brett, what would you say
Yeah,
as
no,
far as the process or the end result, hitting the goal is most rewarding for you?
I mean, for me, it's always the process because anytime you hit a goal, I don't know, maybe it's the way I'm wired, is I'm just kind of interested in what the next goal is. And I've never yet hit a goal where I'm like, great, I'm fulfilled. I think that sounds like really boring to me. And it's the process, it's building it, it's creating. That's really, I think, just mentioned creating the writing, creating a business, creating a charity, creating a culture, like creating things is just so much fun. And I think that's the process that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and Mylon, I saw you shaking your head. I think you probably agree. I get to
Mhm.
reaching a goal, and there's elation for about 1 minute, and then I very quickly go to depression. It's like
Tell
it's
me
just
about
like it's 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 difficult. And I love what you put in the chat. As some of you and your co-founder talk about, is we prayed for these problems, and that's that. I think that's beautiful because, and I call them happy problems. Most of the problems are
it.
happy problems, or a lot of them are first world problems. Is the other way to look at it.
Hmm.
But Brett, you and Kelly want to say something a little bit along those lines?
Yeah, no, I love that quote. That's such a great quote. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah, it's always interesting. We get to a point where you're like, how, like, oh man, we have this problem. It's like, yeah, but like we had to get to this point to have this problem. We weren't here a year ago. Like, thank God we made it this far. That's
Yeah.
kind of how we always look at it. We
And
prayed to get
also,
here, and
like,
now we're
did you
here.
think there was going to be a day where there weren't problems? Like
Right.
it's like sort out your expectations, dummy. Like you're running a business, you're writing a book. Like it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a
Yeah.
mess until it's not. Like
Hmm.
so I remember saying something to my friend Jeff, whose kid went to Richmond actually, and loved it. And I was saying, "Oh my God, this thing's driving me crazy. I'm never going to finish it or whatever." And he just said, "Wah wah wah." And I was like, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Per like the mentor that tells you the truth. I was like, "You're right." And I hear him all the time in my head, like, "Wah wah wah." Like I have so many podcast recordings to do. Wah wah wah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I love that perspective. Um,
There's
just
always going to be problems. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'll real quickly just touch on the question everybody else is answering. For me, it's all about the process. Like I learned very little from the goal itself. I learned everything from the process that it took to achieving that goal. And I like both Brett and you and Alan says, like, yeah, once you get there, it's like, great, like I made it. All right, what are we gonna do next? Like, what's the next thing? Oh, we wanted to get 1,000 users. Great. Like, how can we get 5,000? Like, what do we got to do there? So yeah, it's all about the process. And again, like being an entrepreneur, or at least when you're building like a tech-based startup, you have to be obsessed with the problem. Like, don't get obsessed with the features. Like, I have to remind myself that as a person that's writing all the features, like, don't get so obsessed with building this really, really cool feature because at the end of the day, like, that feature may be obsolete in a month. People might not even use the damn thing. But, like, what is the problem that you are trying to solve? You have to be so obsessed with that more than anything else, or else, like, your business will not succeed because you're not solving a problem that people actually have. So,
Yeah. And this
I just want to
problem.
say I don't get
Okay.
depressed after I reach a goal. I have a
All
very
right.
lasting
Everybody's different.
feeling.
yeah.
I have a very lasting feeling of satisfaction. Like even, and I remember thinking it when The Middle Place, which was the first book, came out and it was on the bestseller list, and I was going around doing readings with my father, who I thought was dying, and now here he was next to me. I remember thinking, like, if nothing else ever happens, I am satisfied. And I have retained that. I
And
feel satisfied.
I hope
we
so.
would, I would love a master class on that. I think that needs to be maybe your next book for at least the
Okay.
three of us to read,
Yeah.
because it's hard, and I think that really boils down to gratitude. If you're focused on gratitude, and that's where I think these are the problems we prayed for. That's gratitude. So focusing on that and being grateful for where you're at, but also balancing that with what's next, so you can continue to grow.